My brother's drunk driving accident and parents trying to cover it up. Best Reddit, welcome to Silent Wars. In today's video, we're diving into a shocking family betrayal. It's about a reckless night that changed everything for one family and the dangerous consequences that followed. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to our channel for more gripping stories like this one. Growing up in a household where favoritism was not just common but deeply ingrained, I always felt like I was living in the shadow of my younger brother, Tristan. As the older child, I thought I'd have more responsibilities and more recognition for the hard work I put into my life, but instead, I became nothing more than a background player in a family drama where Tristan was the lead. My name is User, and this is the story of how I came to realize that sometimes family can be the most toxic force in your life, and how I finally decided to take control of my own destiny. Since I was a kid, it was obvious that my younger brother Tristan was the golden child in the family. The rules didn't apply to him the way they did to me. I was expected to excel in everything I did, while he coasted by with minimal effort. Growing up, my parents made it clear that Tristan was the one who could do no wrong. And if I dared to call attention to any of the obvious double standards in our household, I would be met with a wall of denial. It was like living in a sitcom, but there was no laughter. My entire childhood and teenage years were spent working hard to be noticed, while my brother did the bare minimum and received all the praise. It was a strange feeling, knowing that my parents only seemed to care about Tristan's success, no matter how shallow or undeserving it was. In high school, I had to maintain a 3.8 GPA while working part-time to help out with expenses. I wasn't allowed to go out with friends because my parents insisted I needed to focus on my future. Meanwhile, Tristan, who barely passed his classes, spent every weekend partying with no consequences, as it was just him being young and social. It didn't matter how much I accomplished or how hard I worked, my successes were downplayed, while every small thing Tristan did was celebrated like a grand achievement. The double standards didn't stop when I graduated from high school. While I was juggling a part-time job and full-time college courses, Tristan took his time, figuring things out. He bounced around from major to major, constantly failed courses, and spent more time at parties than studying. And yet, when he finally graduated with a pathetic 2.4 GPA, he was celebrated with a lavish gift, a Tesla Model 3 Performance, a $60,000 car. Not the base model, but the top-of-the-line one with all the fancy features. I still remember the moment my parents handed him the keys. It was like a scene straight out of a bad reality show. They all gathered in the driveway, and my brother, who could barely string together a coherent sentence without slurring, danced around like he had just won the lottery. My parents took 500 photos for Facebook, all while I stood there, speechless and seething. I had worked hard my entire life, earned my college degree with honors, and found a job within 2 weeks of graduation. For all of that, my reward was a text message congratulating me and a $50 Applebee's gift card. That was it. No celebration, no acknowledgement of my achievements. Meanwhile, Tristan's bare minimum effort was rewarded with a car that cost more than my first year of college tuition. The disparity was maddening. But the worst part wasn't just the gifts or the constant praise for Tristan. It was how he acted once he got the Tesla. It wasn't just a car to him, it became his entire personality. Every minute of the day, he would talk about it. He'd share Instagram stories from the dashboard, telling everyone about the car's features. He would rev the car's engine at 2 a.m. when he came home from the bar, waking up the entire neighborhood. Yes, I know Teslas don't actually have engines, but he would accelerate the car back and forth in the driveway just to make the whirring sound at full blast. It wasn't just obnoxious, it was dangerous. I constantly warned him about his reckless driving, especially when he was drunk. But my warnings fell on deaf ears. Tristan wasn't just a nuisance on the road, he was actively putting people's lives in danger. He would drink heavily, then get behind the wheel of his new car, with his equally drunk friends in the passenger seats, taking joyrides around town. I offered to be his designated driver multiple times, or to call him an Uber, but he always refused. "Bro, the car drives itself," he'd say, not understanding that the car's autopilot couldn't save him from the effects of alcohol. I knew something terrible was bound to happen, and I tried to warn everyone, but they didn't listen. Tristan's reckless behavior was ignored, and even when I confronted my parents about it, they brushed me off. "You're just jealous that Tristan has friends and enjoys his life," my mother said one night. And that was the thing. My entire existence had been reduced to jealousy and bitterness, while Tristan got to be the fun-loving, free-spirited, golden child who could do no wrong. And then it happened. The crash. I was in my room one Thursday night when I heard the commotion. It was 3 a.m. and my parents were rushing around. My father's car started and they were gone. I later found out that Tristan had crashed the Tesla into a tree after leaving the bar. When my father returned, he was helping a barely conscious Tristan into the house. His face was bruised, his clothes were disheveled, and he was covered in blood. But the car was destroyed. The front end was smashed in, the windshield was cracked, and the airbags had deployed. It was a $60,000 paperweight. My parents didn't confront him about his reckless driving or the fact that he had been drunk. Instead, they tried to cover up the accident. They arranged for the car to be towed back to the garage, where it sat for days, completely undisturbed. And when they finally called a family meeting to discuss the situation, they didn't ask Tristan to take responsibility. No, they asked me to help pay for the damages. They expected me to pay $14,500 to repair a car I didn't even own, because they claimed it was our family's responsibility. My brother had crashed his car, and now I was expected to pay for it. That was the final straw. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This wasn't just about money. This was about years of favoritism and manipulation, and I was done. I refused to pay a single cent. I refused to be the family's scapegoat any longer. Tristan had caused the accident, and it was his responsibility to deal with the consequences. In the end, the truth came out. The insurance investigator uncovered the full extent of Tristan's lies, and my family was left to deal with the fallout. Tristan was arrested for his actions, and my parents were fined for their involvement in the insurance fraud scheme. As for me, I finally broke free from the toxic environment of my childhood home. I found a place of my own and began building the life I had always wanted, one where I wasn't constantly overlooked and manipulated. The whole experience taught me an invaluable lesson. Sometimes, family isn't about unconditional love. Sometimes, it's about protecting your own well-being, even if that means cutting ties with people who have never treated you with the respect you deserve. It's not easy, but it's necessary for your own growth and happiness. Growing up, I always felt like I was an afterthought in my own family. My younger brother, Tristan, was the golden child, the one who could do no wrong in the eyes of my parents. I, on the other hand, was the responsible older sibling, constantly putting in the effort, but never receiving the same recognition or rewards as Tristan. Little did I know, this favoritism would escalate into a betrayal that would shake me to my core and push me to take a stand like never before. From the time I was old enough to understand, it was clear that my parents had a bias toward Tristan. He was given preferential treatment in every aspect of our lives. For instance, I had to pay $400 a month in rent to live at home, even though I was still a young adult and trying to save for my future. Meanwhile, Tristan, who was younger and less responsible, lived rent-free. He ate the food I helped pay for and used the utilities I contributed to. And to top it all off, he was treated like royalty, while I was left to handle all the responsibilities of adulthood. The more I tried to speak up about this double standard, the more my parents would dismiss my concerns. I worked hard to maintain a high GPA throughout high school and college while juggling part-time jobs. I was denied the ability to enjoy my youth because my parents insisted that I focus on my future. Yet Tristan, who barely scraped by with his grades, was allowed to party every weekend as it was his time to enjoy life. Even his lack of effort and poor grades were celebrated with praise. I worked countless hours, saving money and planning for a better future, but every time I thought I was making progress, something would happen, another family emergency, and I would have to give up my hard-earned savings to help them out. When I graduated from college with honors, I thought I would finally be able to escape this cycle. I found a job within 2 weeks of graduation and thought my life was on the right path. But instead of a celebration or congratulations, I received a half-hearted text and a $50 Applebee's gift card. My parents didn't even bother to throw me a party. No congratulations, no acknowledgement of the hard work I had put in to achieve my goals. Meanwhile, Tristan, who had only managed to graduate with a 2.4 GPA after 6 years of college, was celebrated with the most extravagant gift my parents could afford, a brand new Tesla Model 3 Performance. And not just any Tesla, the top-of-the-line model, the $60,000 one with all the bells and whistles. This car was more than just a gift. It was a symbol of everything that was wrong in our family. The day they handed Tristan the keys, it felt like my entire life had been reduced to a joke. I stood in the driveway watching as he danced around in excitement, as if he had just won the lottery. My parents took pictures for Facebook, plastering his triumph all over social media. And when I made the mistake of mentioning my own achievements, my honors degree, my job, I was met with the dismissive comment from my mother. "Well, college was easier for you." My parents seemed to believe that Tristan's struggles were far more significant than my own. He could do no wrong, no matter how lazy or irresponsible he was. And I, the one who had worked harder than anyone, was simply overlooked and dismissed. But it wasn't just the gifts or the accolades that set Tristan apart. It was his attitude after receiving the car. The Tesla became his entire personality. Every day, he posted about it on Instagram, sharing photos and videos from the dashboard, boasting about his new car like it was the greatest accomplishment of his life. He'd rev the car in the driveway at 2 a.m., waking up the entire neighborhood, just so he could show off his new toy. It was all a performance, an act to feed his ego, and it was driving me mad. What bothered me the most, however, wasn't just the showmanship. It was how Tristan started driving the Tesla recklessly and dangerously. He treated the streets like his personal racetrack, speeding through residential areas and performing donuts in parking lots. He filmed dangerous TikTok videos, showing off how cool it was to let the Tesla drive itself, while he pretended to sleep in the passenger seat. Every time I tried to warn him about his reckless driving and the dangers of drinking and driving, he would laugh it off, saying the car was safe because it had autopilot. I repeatedly offered to be his designated driver or call him an Uber, but he always refused. He didn't care about the risks to himself or others. I knew something bad was going to happen, and when it finally did, it wasn't a surprise. One Thursday night, while I was working in my room, I heard the chaos downstairs. My parents rushed out of the house, and I found my mother looking like she had seen a ghost. When I asked what was going on, she muttered that Tristan had gotten into a little accident with the Tesla. But I knew better. It wasn't a little accident, it was a disaster waiting to happen, and now it had finally come to a head. Tristan had wrapped the Tesla around a tree after drinking and driving. The front end of the car was destroyed, airbags deployed, windshield cracked, the works. And what did my parents do? They covered it up. The next few days were a blur. The car was towed back to the garage, hidden from view. My parents arranged a family meeting to discuss how they could fix the situation, and that's when they dropped the bombshell. They wanted me to pay $14,500 to repair the car I didn't own, the car I didn't drive, the car that had been damaged because my brother chose to drive drunk. They expected me to pay for the damages, even though I had warned them this would happen. When I refused, they tried to guilt-trip me, pulling out all the stops to manipulate me into helping them cover up their mistakes. But this time, I refused to back down. I wasn't going to be the scapegoat anymore. I wasn't going to pay for my brother's reckless behavior, and I wasn't going to let my family continue to manipulate me. I stood my ground, and when they tried to frame me for vandalizing the car to make the insurance cover the damages, I knew I had to do something. I called the insurance investigator, shared everything I knew about Tristan's reckless driving, and exposed the truth. In the end, Tristan faced the consequences of his actions. He was arrested for his DUI and for attempting to frame me. My parents, although they weren't charged, faced significant fines for their role in the cover-up. I walked away from that toxic environment, found my own place, and started rebuilding my life. I finally had the freedom to live without the constant manipulation and guilt trips. Looking back, I realized that standing up for myself was the best decision I ever made. No longer was I the family's fall guy. I was able to reclaim my sense of self and live on my own terms. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary for my peace of mind. I've learned that family loyalty doesn't mean sacrificing your happiness and integrity for the sake of others. Sometimes, walking away is the healthiest choice you can make. Family dynamics can often be complicated, but sometimes they can become so toxic that they feel unbearable. I, a 24-year-old man, have lived my entire life under the shadow of my younger brother Tristan, who is always seen as the golden child in our family. The favoritism was not only apparent, but it was also aggressively enforced, to the point where it affected every part of my life from my childhood to adulthood. As much as I tried to play by the rules and fulfill my responsibilities, it was clear that my efforts meant nothing compared to the constant praise and admiration my brother received for doing the bare minimum. Little did I know that this unequal treatment would escalate into a betrayal that would push me to my limits and force me to make a life-changing decision. Growing up, I was always expected to follow the rules and take care of my responsibilities. At 18, I was required to pay $400 a month in rent to continue living in the same house I grew up in, even though I was still trying to build my future. Meanwhile, my brother, who was 2 years younger than me, lived rent-free. He didn't pay for food, utilities, or anything else. In fact, he was pampered to the point where it felt as if he owned the house, while I was left to do all the work. I had to take on part-time jobs during high school and college to pay for rent and other expenses, while Tristan barely worked at all, and was still allowed to enjoy his weekends partying without any consequences. The double standard was glaring, and it was incredibly frustrating. My parents never acknowledged my hard work. They were always quick to praise Tristan for his mediocrity. In high school, I was expected to maintain a 3.8 GPA while working on weekends at a local hardware store. I couldn't attend parties because my parents insisted that I needed to focus on my future. Meanwhile, Tristan barely passed his classes, partied every weekend, and was told he deserved to enjoy his youth. Every academic achievement I made was met with half-hearted praise, while Tristan's lack of effort was met with enthusiastic approval. It was demoralizing. After I graduated college with honors and found a job within 2 weeks, I thought things would finally change. I thought my hard work would finally be recognized, but instead, I got a simple congratulatory text and a $50 Applebee's gift card. There were no celebrations, no recognition of the sacrifices I had made. My parents didn't even throw me a party. Meanwhile, Tristan, who had struggled through college with a dismal 2.4 GPA and multiple failed classes, received a brand new Tesla Model 3 Performance. Not just any Tesla, but the $60,000 top-of-the-line model, complete with all the features. I stood there, stunned, watching as Tristan danced around with excitement, while my parents snapped pictures for Facebook, boasting about their golden child. My frustration and anger reached a boiling point when I tried to voice my concerns about the favoritism in our family. I pointed out how hard I had worked for everything I had achieved, only to be overshadowed by my brother's mediocrity. My parents dismissed me outright. My mother even had the audacity to say, "College was easier for you, Tristan really struggled." I couldn't believe it. Tristan had barely put in any effort. I had worked my butt off, balancing part-time jobs, college, and my responsibilities at home, yet my accomplishments were always brushed aside in favor of Tristan's barely there efforts. Tristan, on the other hand, was completely unaware of the damage his behavior was causing. The Tesla became his entire identity. He couldn't go 5 minutes without talking about it, sharing videos of it on social media, and showing off the car like it was the greatest achievement of his life. He'd rev the car's engine in the driveway at 2 a.m., waking up the entire neighborhood, all while blasting music and acting like he was in a movie. It was obnoxious. It was as if the car had somehow elevated him above everyone else, and he made sure the entire world knew it. The worst part? He started driving recklessly. He treated the streets like his own personal racetrack, speeding down residential roads and performing stunts in parking lots. I warned him repeatedly that he was going to hurt someone or get himself killed, but he just laughed it off. My parents didn't care. They just looked the other way and said, "He's just having fun." But then, the inevitable happened. One Thursday night, I was in my room when I heard the commotion downstairs. My parents rushed out of the house, and I saw my mother looking terrified when she came back inside. She told me that Tristan had been in an accident with the Tesla. Of course, when I asked for details, she downplayed it, claiming it was just a minor collision. But I knew better. It wasn't a minor collision. Tristan had crashed the Tesla after drinking and driving. The car was totaled, front-end destroyed, airbags deployed, windshield cracked, the works. And what did my parents do? They covered it up. The next few days were a blur. Tristan was barely injured, just a bruise on his forehead, but the car was a total loss. My parents acted as if nothing had happened, and they even tried to blame me for the accident. They asked me to pay for the damages, $14,500 for a car I didn't own, didn't drive, and didn't even want. They were willing to throw me under the bus just to protect Tristan. My parents' manipulation reached new heights. They guilted me, saying things like, "This is what family does." They tried to convince me that I should chip in to cover the costs, because I was the only one with any savings, even though Tristan was the one who had crashed the car while driving drunk. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My brother had been irresponsible and reckless, and now I was being asked to pay for his mistakes. This was the last straw. I refused to give them a single cent. I refused to take the blame for something I didn't do, and I refused to let my family manipulate me any longer. It was time to stand up for myself. The fallout was immediate. My parents tried to guilt-trip me into helping them, even going as far as to frame me for vandalizing the car to make the insurance cover the damages. But I wasn't having it. I called the insurance investigator and told him everything I knew about the situation, including Tristan's reckless driving, his drinking, and the fact that my parents were covering it up. It didn't take long for the truth to come out. The investigator discovered security footage showing Tristan staging the entire vandalism. My parents were exposed for trying to commit insurance fraud, and Tristan was arrested for his actions. After everything was said and done, Tristan faced the consequences. He pled guilty to DUI, insurance fraud, and vandalism. He received a sentence of 6 months in county jail, 3 years probation, and a hefty fine. My parents, although not charged, had to pay significant fines for their involvement in the cover-up. As for me, I walked away from that toxic situation. I moved out, found my own apartment, and started rebuilding my life. I finally had the peace and freedom I had been yearning for. Standing up for myself was the best decision I ever made. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. I had spent my entire life being the responsible one, the one who always did the right thing, but never received the same treatment or appreciation. For once, I put myself first. I realized that family loyalty shouldn't come at the expense of your own happiness and well-being. Sometimes, walking away from toxic family dynamics is the only way to protect yourself and your future. Family dynamics can often be a source of both strength and tension. For me, however, it felt like an endless cycle of emotional manipulation, deceit, and unfair treatment. I, a 24-year-old male, have lived my life under the constant shadow of my younger brother, Tristan, who, in my family's eyes, was always the golden child. From the moment I can remember, it felt as if the world revolved around him, while I was left in the background, struggling for recognition. The preferential treatment Tristan received was so glaring that it became almost unbearable. Yet nothing could have prepared me for the shocking turn of events that would make me question my entire family. Since I turned 18, I was expected to pay $400 a month in rent to stay in the same house I grew up in. Yes, you read that right, rent. For my own bedroom, which hadn't been updated since I was 12. Meanwhile, my brother, just 2 years younger than me, lived rent-free. He didn't have to contribute to household expenses or even make any meaningful effort in life. He was given a free pass, while I worked hard to maintain a job and manage my responsibilities. My brother's idea of working hard was partying every weekend, yet he was constantly praised for his so-called efforts, while my own struggles went unnoticed. What hurt even more was the academic double standard in our house. I was required to maintain a 3.8 GPA while working weekends to help pay for things. I wasn't allowed to attend parties or do anything that might distract from my future, as my parents insisted that I focus on my studies. But my brother? He barely scraped through high school, changing majors multiple times in college, and he was still allowed to party and slack off without consequence. Every single one of my academic achievements was met with a half-hearted good job, while Tristan was celebrated for doing the bare minimum. I worked my tail off in college, balancing a full course load with a part-time job. I graduated with honors, landed a job within 2 weeks. And yet, when I shared this accomplishment with my family, all I received was a congratulatory text message and a $50 Applebee's gift card. No party, no recognition, nothing. On the other hand, Tristan, who could barely keep a GPA above 2.0, was rewarded with a brand new Tesla Model 3 Performance, a $60,000 car, just because he graduated college with a fraction of the effort I put in. I couldn't believe it. The entire family gathered in the driveway to watch him dance around in excitement as he received the keys to the car, with my parents snapping hundreds of photos for Facebook. It was humiliating. The most frustrating part was how my parents treated Tristan after his gift. The car wasn't just a mode of transportation for him, it became his entire identity. He couldn't go 5 minutes without talking about it or showing it off on social media. Every night he would rev the engine at 2 a.m., waking up the entire neighborhood. Of course, I had to be the responsible one, constantly reminding him of the dangers of reckless driving, but it was clear that no one cared. My parents, instead of telling him to be responsible, encouraged his behavior, letting him treat the streets like his personal racetrack. I tried everything I could to warn him, but my warnings fell on deaf ears. Tristan was determined to act like the king of the road, and I was nothing but the buzzkill for pointing out that driving like that could kill someone. And then, it happened. One Thursday night, I was sitting in my room when I heard a loud bang from downstairs, followed by frantic talking. My parents rushed out of the house, and when my mother came back inside, she looked like she had seen a ghost. When I asked what happened, she hesitated and finally murmured that my brother had been in an accident with the Tesla. I knew something was terribly wrong, but my parents did everything they could to downplay it. "It's just a minor accident," they said, but I could see right through their lies. Tristan had crashed the car after drinking and driving just as I had warned them he would. The front end of the car was completely smashed, airbags deployed, and the windshield was cracked. It was a miracle that Tristan wasn't more seriously injured. The situation only got worse when my parents decided to cover it up. They didn't want the police involved, and they certainly didn't want to deal with the consequences of Tristan's actions. Instead of admitting that Tristan had made a grave mistake, they started making excuses and trying to shift the blame onto me. They actually asked me to pay for the repairs to a car I didn't own. They even tried to frame me for vandalizing the car, hoping that the insurance would cover the damages under a false claim. My parents, who had always treated me as second-rate, now wanted to use me as the scapegoat for their mistakes. When I refused to pay for the damages, things escalated. They told me I was being selfish, that I should help out because we're a family. My mother even said, "You're the only one with significant savings right now, so you need to chip in." I couldn't believe it. This was the same family who had made me pay rent in my own house, who had never celebrated my achievements, and who had always treated my efforts as insignificant. Now they wanted me to pay for their son's recklessness. But I wasn't going to take the blame for something I didn't do. I refused to cover for Tristan any longer. The truth was, Tristan had made his own bed, and now he had to lie in it. It wasn't my responsibility to bail him out, and I wasn't going to let my family manipulate me into taking the fall. The fight became more heated, and eventually I stopped responding to their demands. Days passed, and my parents continued to pressure me to change my mind. They tried every tactic: guilt, intimidation, and manipulation, but I stood my ground. Then I learned that Tristan had gone even further. He had staged the damage to the car in an attempt to frame me for vandalizing it. He took my baseball bat from my closet and used it to smash the already damaged car, hoping to make it look like I was responsible. When my parents got involved in the scheme, they tried to use me as the scapegoat, thinking I wouldn't fight back. But I wasn't going to let them get away with it. I called the insurance investigator and shared everything I knew. The truth came out, and it wasn't long before the authorities got involved. Tristan was arrested for insurance fraud, and my parents faced legal consequences for their involvement. Tristan's future was ruined, and my family's reputation was shattered. But for me, the worst was over. I moved out, found a place of my own, and started building the life I deserved. In the end, I realized that family loyalty doesn't mean covering for people who harm you or make you feel inferior. I had spent my whole life trying to be the responsible one, but I finally learned that putting myself first wasn't selfish, it was necessary. I had to break free from the toxic hold my family had on me in order to live a life of my own. Family dynamics can often be complicated, but for me, it's been a constant roller coaster of emotional manipulation, favoritism, and unfair treatment. Since I was a child, I, a 24-year-old male, was always cast in the shadows by my younger brother Tristan, who, in my family's eyes, could do no wrong. From a very young age, it was clear that Tristan was the golden child of the family. Every move he made was celebrated, while my accomplishments, no matter how hard-earned, went unnoticed. This favoritism became a normal part of my life, and it wasn't until adulthood that I realized just how toxic and unfair my family's treatment of me truly was. Growing up, I was constantly expected to take on responsibilities that should have been shared equally within the family. When I turned 18, I was expected to pay $400 a month in rent to live at home in a room that hadn't changed since I was 12. Meanwhile, my younger brother, who didn't work, didn't contribute, and certainly didn't have any bills to pay, lived rent-free. I was forced to pay for my food and utilities, even though I was working multiple jobs to help support the household. But it didn't stop there. The emotional toll was even more profound. While I worked hard to maintain good grades in school and balance a part-time job, Tristan was allowed to party every weekend, and his academic achievements were never questioned. In fact, every time I succeeded, it was met with a half-hearted good job, while Tristan's mediocrity was praised as if he were a genius. It felt like a never-ending battle where I was expected to take the high road, work harder, and give more, while my brother was given everything on a silver platter. Fast forward to my college years, and nothing changed. I worked part-time while taking a full course load, graduated with honors, and found a job within 2 weeks of finishing my degree. I thought this would finally be the turning point for me, but no, my family didn't care. I received a generic congratulatory text and a $50 gift card to Applebee's, but that was it. No party, no recognition, and certainly no celebration. Meanwhile, my brother, who could barely maintain a GPA above 2.0, was rewarded with a brand new $60,000 Tesla Model 3 Performance. Not only was he handed a top-of-the-line car, but the entire family gathered around in awe as he jumped for joy like he had just won the lottery. My parents made sure to take hundreds of photos for Facebook, and my father even had the audacity to look at me and say, "Don't be jealous. Your brother deserves this after working so hard." I was speechless. I had worked my entire life to be recognized, and my brother was being rewarded for doing absolutely nothing. The absurdity didn't stop there. The moment Tristan received the Tesla, it became his entire personality. He couldn't go 5 minutes without talking about it, posting pictures of it on social media, and showing off to his friends. Every night, he would come home from partying and rev the engine in the driveway, waking up the entire neighborhood. Of course, Teslas don't have engines that rev, but that didn't stop him from slamming the accelerator to create a loud, whining sound that echoed throughout the entire block. It was obnoxious, disrespectful, and completely inconsiderate. But my parents did nothing. They were too busy basking in the glory of their precious golden child to care about the way his behavior was affecting everyone around him. But then, the inevitable happened. One Thursday night, I was in my room when I heard a loud bang from downstairs. It was followed by a flurry of activity in the hallway, and soon I saw my father rush out of the house in a panic. My mother, looking completely distraught, returned inside a few minutes later. I asked her what had happened, and she barely managed to say, "Your brother had a little accident with the Tesla." A little accident? It turns out that Tristan had been driving drunk, something I had warned my parents about on numerous occasions, and had crashed the Tesla into a tree. My heart sank. I wasn't surprised, but I was deeply disappointed that my family was once again willing to cover up his mistakes. What happened next was even worse. My parents, instead of holding Tristan accountable for his reckless behavior, decided to cover up the accident. They hid the car in the garage, arranged for it to be towed without involving the police, and tried to fix it without reporting it to the insurance company. But they weren't done there. They had the audacity to ask me to pay for the damages to the car damages caused by my brother's irresponsible drunk driving. They wanted me to contribute $14,500 to repair a car that I didn't own, didn't drive, and certainly didn't crash. I couldn't believe it. Not only was I being asked to cover for Tristan's mistake, but they were also trying to manipulate me into taking the fall for his reckless actions. At first, I thought they were joking, but when I realized they were serious, I snapped. I laughed, but it wasn't a laugh of humor. It was a laugh of disbelief and frustration. I had spent my entire life working hard to earn respect and recognition, and now they were asking me to pay for a car crash that I had nothing to do with. I refused. I told them I wasn't going to help pay for something that wasn't my fault, and when my parents tried to guilt-trip me into helping, I stood firm in my decision. This was the moment I realized I had to put myself first. I wasn't going to let my family continue to manipulate me, guilt me, or take advantage of my hard-earned money. Things only got worse from there. My parents continued to pressure me, but I refused to back down. Tristan, ever the spoiled brat, even went so far as to frame me for vandalizing the car in an attempt to get the insurance company to cover the repairs. He took my baseball bat from my room and used it to further damage the car, hoping to blame me for the incident. But I wasn't going to let him get away with it. I went to the insurance investigator and told him everything I knew. The truth came out, and Tristan was arrested for insurance fraud, while my parents faced legal consequences for their role in the cover-up. After everything had blown up, I realized that I was finally free from the emotional grip my family had on me. I moved out, found a place of my own, and started to rebuild my life. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. No longer would I be the scapegoat, the one who was always asked to sacrifice for the family's sake. I had spent too long trying to please people who never appreciated me, and now I was taking control of my own future. In the end, I learned an important lesson. Family loyalty doesn't mean sacrificing your own well-being for others who don't appreciate you. It's okay to put yourself first, especially when you've been treated unfairly for so long. I'm no longer willing to let my family's toxic behavior define me. I've moved on, and I'm finally living the life I deserve. Life has a funny way of showing us just how deep the roots of favoritism and manipulation can grow within a family. For me, it took 24 years to truly understand the depth of my family's dysfunction and how it had shaped my life. I had spent my entire youth working tirelessly, trying to make something of myself, only to be overshadowed by my younger brother Tristan, who was always the golden child, the one who could do no wrong. But this time, things would change. This was the story of my betrayal, my breaking point, and ultimately, my decision to stop being the family's scapegoat. It all began in childhood. From the moment I could remember, Tristan was the favorite. He was the one who could do whatever he wanted, while I was expected to follow the rules, meet expectations, and sacrifice for the family. The most glaring example was how I was treated when I turned 18. I was told that I would have to pay $400 in rent to live at home. Yes, you read that right, $400 to live in the same house I grew up in a room that hadn't been changed since I was 12. Meanwhile, my younger brother, who was still in high school at the time, lived there rent-free. He ate the food I helped pay for, used the utilities I helped maintain, and walked around the house as if it were his own personal kingdom. I confronted my parents about this unfairness, but instead of listening, they attacked me. They didn't want to acknowledge their double standards. They could see that Tristan had it easier, but they didn't care. He was their golden child, and that was that. It wasn't just the rent, everything in our house revolved around Tristan. When I worked hard in school, maintained a 3.8 GPA, and helped out with household chores, I got a pat on the back and a "good job, son." But when Tristan scraped by in school, failed classes, and partied every weekend, my parents treated him like a hero. He was allowed to skip out on his responsibilities and party without consequence, while I was expected to be the responsible, hard-working son. My entire life had been spent under the shadow of Tristan's entitlement. Even after high school, when I went to college and worked multiple jobs to get through it, my parents treated me as if I were asking for a reward every time I succeeded. When I graduated with honors and found a job within 2 weeks of finishing my degree, I thought that would be the turning point. Finally, I would be recognized for my hard work, right? Wrong. I got a text message and a $50 gift card to Applebee's. There was no celebration, no party, just a cold, impersonal acknowledgement of my success. Then there was Tristan. After barely scraping through college, switching his major multiple times, and failing classes, he was rewarded with a brand new $60,000 Tesla Model 3 Performance. Not only was it a flashy, expensive gift, but my parents made a big show of it. The entire family gathered in the driveway to witness my brother's big moment as my father handed him the keys to the car. Tristan was ecstatic, jumping up and down as if he had won the lottery, and my mother couldn't snap enough photos for Facebook. Meanwhile, I stood there, feeling invisible and furious. My father turned to me and said, "Don't be jealous. Your brother deserves this after working so hard." Working so hard? Tristan hadn't worked a day in his life. He hadn't even completed a full semester of college without switching majors. And yet, there he was, with a $60,000 car. From that moment on, Tristan was insufferable. His Tesla became his entire identity. He couldn't go 5 minutes without talking about it, posting pictures on social media, and showing it off to his friends. Every night, he would come home from a bar, rev the engine in the driveway, waking up the entire neighborhood. Of course, Teslas don't actually have engines to rev, but that didn't stop him from flooring the accelerator and causing a loud, obnoxious whining noise that could be heard for blocks. It was infuriating, but my parents said nothing. They encouraged it. After all, he was their golden child. Then came the inevitable. One Thursday night, I was sitting in my room when I heard a loud crash followed by my parents rushing out of the house. My mother came back in looking completely shaken. When I asked her what happened, she barely managed to tell me that Tristan had had a little accident with the Tesla. A little accident? Tristan had been driving drunk again, something I had warned my parents about, and had crashed the car into a tree. My heart sank. It was only a matter of time before something like this happened, but what came next was worse. My parents weren't angry at him. They weren't holding him accountable. No, instead, they tried to cover it up. They hid the car in the garage, and when I tried to bring it up, they insisted it was no big deal. But then they did something truly unbelievable. They asked me to help pay for the damages to the car. Yes, the same car that I didn't own, didn't drive, and didn't crash. My parents wanted me to pay $14,500 to repair a car that wasn't even mine, simply because Tristan had been drunk driving. I was stunned. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. They expected me to clean up Tristan's mess, as they always had. But this time, I refused. I told them I wasn't going to pay for a car I didn't own, and I wasn't going to take responsibility for something that wasn't my fault. They tried to guilt-trip me, using the usual tactics they always use to manipulate me into doing what they wanted. But I stood firm. I was done being the family's scapegoat. I wasn't going to let them use me anymore. The situation escalated quickly. My brother, in an attempt to cover up his mistake, decided to frame me for vandalizing the car. He took my baseball bat from my room, further damaged the Tesla, and tried to blame me for the destruction. But I wasn't going to let him get away with it. I went to the insurance investigator and told him everything. The truth came out, and Tristan was arrested for insurance fraud. My parents, although they weren't charged, faced significant fines for their involvement in covering up the accident. In the aftermath of the whole ordeal, I realized something important. I was no longer willing to let my family's toxic behavior define me. I moved out, found a place of my own, and started living life on my own terms. For the first time, I felt free. I wasn't the scapegoat anymore. I was finally standing up for myself. Family dynamics can be tricky, especially when it seems like one person always gets the preferential treatment. I found myself in this exact situation growing up, where everything I did was overshadowed by the actions of my younger brother, who seemed to have it all. But when the truth came out, and I was forced to confront not only my family's blatant favoritism, but also their involvement in illegal activities to protect him, everything changed. From the beginning, it was clear to everyone except me that my younger brother, Tristan, was the golden child in my family. I was the responsible, hard-working one, the person who kept my head down, did well in school, and worked long hours to get ahead. But no matter how hard I tried, it never felt like enough. My parents praised Tristan for doing the bare minimum and gave him a free pass for everything, from poor grades to reckless behavior. Meanwhile, I was expected to be perfect. But the worst part was that I never got the recognition I deserved. Even after graduating with honors from college and landing a job almost immediately, my parents barely acknowledged my accomplishments. Instead, they celebrated Tristan's mediocre achievements, like switching his major 3 times, barely passing his classes, and partying through most of his college years. But the tipping point came when my parents gave Tristan a brand new Tesla, a $60,000 luxury car, for finishing a less than impressive college career. I was furious. Not only had he done nothing to earn such a gift, but it was clear that he had no appreciation for it. He saw the car as an extension of his personality, constantly posting about it on social media, showing off the dashboard, and revving the engine late at night, waking up the entire neighborhood. For a while, it felt like I was invisible in my own home. Tristan's obnoxious behavior, combined with the fact that he was constantly getting away with it, made me feel like I didn't belong. His behavior was reckless, but no one called him out. He drove drunk, sped through residential streets, and put everyone at risk, but my parents brushed it off. They made excuses for him, and when I tried to intervene or warn them, they told me to mind my own business. It was only a matter of time before his behavior caught up with him. One Thursday night, I was in my room when I heard a loud crash, followed by my parents rushing out of the house. When my mother came back inside, she looked like she had seen a ghost. She was frantic, barely able to tell me what had happened. Apparently, Tristan had crashed the Tesla into a tree after driving drunk, and they were already working on a plan to cover it up. My heart sank as I realized how far my parents were willing to go to protect him. But the situation didn't stop there. My parents, rather than holding Tristan accountable for his actions, tried to make me pay for the damages. They asked me, the one who had worked hard to get ahead, to contribute $14,500 to repair the car that I didn't own and didn't even drive. It was absurd, and I couldn't believe they had the nerve to ask me for help. I had been saving money for years to move out and start my life, but my parents saw my savings as an opportunity to fix their son's mistakes. When I refused, they tried to guilt-trip me. My mother even went as far as to say, "You're just jealous you don't have friends like Tristan." The implication was that I was selfish for not wanting to help out with his mess, even though I had no part in it. The worst part came when my brother, in an attempt to cover up his drunken driving, framed me for vandalizing the Tesla. He took my baseball bat from my room and further damaged the car, hoping to blame me for it. This wasn't just a petty act of sibling rivalry, it was an outright betrayal. I couldn't believe that my own brother would go this far to set me up, and that my parents were complicit in it. But I wasn't going to let them get away with it. I went straight to the insurance investigator and told him everything: the reckless driving, the cover-up, and the attempt to frame me. I also provided him with evidence of Tristan's history of dangerous driving and my parents' attempts to cover for him. It didn't take long for the truth to come out. The insurance company refused to cover the damage, and Tristan was arrested for attempting to commit insurance fraud. He was charged with multiple offenses, including driving under the influence, and ultimately pleaded guilty. My parents, although they weren't criminally charged, faced significant fines for their involvement in the cover-up. In the aftermath, I realized something profound. I had spent my entire life allowing my family to dictate my actions, to make me the responsible one while giving Tristan a free pass. But no more. I moved out, found a place of my own, and started living on my own terms. For the first time in my life, I felt free from the constant weight of family expectations. The fallout from the whole situation was intense. My parents, devastated by the loss of their golden child's reputation, tried to manipulate me into retracting my statement. They called me, sent me texts, and even showed up at my door begging for help. They wanted me to ignore the fact that they had allowed Tristan to get away with everything and, in doing so, had put me in a position where I had to make a difficult choice, protect him and keep the peace, or stand up for myself and expose the truth. I chose the latter. When they showed up at my apartment uninvited, I listened to their sob story and then asked them, "Which part of trying to frame me entitled you to my financial assistance?" The look on their faces was priceless. They had no response. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the one who was manipulated. I wasn't the one who was expected to sacrifice for the family's benefit. I closed the door on them and moved on with my life. The police eventually charged Tristan with multiple offenses, including insurance fraud and driving under the influence. His future was on the line, and my parents were left to pick up the pieces of the mess they had helped create. But for me, it was the beginning of something new. I got a promotion at work, started taking night classes to pursue an MBA, and built a life that was free of the toxic family dynamics that had held me back for so long. Looking back, I realized that standing up for myself was the best decision I could have made. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. I had spent too long being the responsible one, the one who always put the family first, while my brother and parents reaped the rewards. It was time for me to take control of my own future, and for the first time, I felt like I was finally in charge of my life. Growing up, I always felt like I was walking in the shadows of my younger brother, who seemed to do no wrong. It wasn't just the typical sibling rivalry, it was a pattern that stretched all the way to my adulthood. My brother Tristan was always treated like the golden child. Everything he did, no matter how insignificant, was met with praise. Meanwhile, I was constantly held to a higher standard, expected to be the responsible one, the one who always did things right. But what finally pushed me over the edge wasn't just the unequal treatment, it was how far my parents were willing to go to protect him, even when it meant throwing me under the bus. I had been working hard for years to save money for my future. At 24, I had already graduated from college, earned honors, and started a job right away. But there was no celebration, no parties, no congratulations, just a half-hearted good job and a gift card for Applebee's. Meanwhile, Tristan, who had barely scraped by in high school and college, received nothing but adulation from my parents. They bought him a brand new Tesla, a $60,000 car, for finishing college with a less than stellar 2.4 GPA. I was furious. Not only was this car a reward for mediocrity, but it also symbolized the blatant favoritism I had been experiencing my entire life. Tristan didn't even seem to care about the responsibility that came with owning such an expensive car. He treated the Tesla like it was a toy, driving recklessly and flaunting it to everyone on social media. Every night, he would come home late from the bar, rev the engine in the driveway to show off, and wake up the entire neighborhood with the electric car's acceleration noise. It didn't matter that I was the one paying rent while he lived rent-free. He was the one who got the luxury car. His behavior was increasingly irresponsible, speeding down residential streets, driving while intoxicated, and even making reckless TikTok videos pretending to sleep while the car was on autopilot. I couldn't understand why my parents weren't doing anything about it. I had warned them time and time again that his actions were dangerous, but they just dismissed me. Every time I suggested he should not be driving drunk, my mother would say, "Oh, he's just being a teenager. Let him have fun." The frustration built up inside me. My hard work, my sacrifices, all went unnoticed, while Tristan was given everything on a silver platter. But nothing prepared me for the night when everything came crashing down. It was a Thursday night when I first heard the commotion. My parents' bedroom door slammed open, and there was frantic whispering in the hallway. My father rushed to the car, and my mother looked terrified when she came downstairs to explain. She told me Tristan had been in an accident, but it was no big deal, a minor collision, she said. but when I looked out the window at 4:30 a.m. and saw my father struggling to hold Tristan up, I knew something was wrong. Tristan was barely walking, missing a shoe, and had a cut on his forehead. His brand new Tesla, the car that my parents had been so proud to give him, was completely destroyed. The front end was smashed in, the airbags had deployed, and the windshield was shattered. The details of what happened soon came to light. Tristan had gone out drinking with friends at the Rusty Nail, a local bar, and then decided it was a good idea to drive home. His friends had encouraged him, egging him on, even videoing him as he did shots and bragged about his new car. The crash occurred when he sped around a corner, lost control of the vehicle, and crashed into a tree. He was lucky to be alive, but the Tesla was totaled. My parents, rather than confronting him about his reckless behavior, tried to cover it up. They didn't call the police. Instead, they made excuses for him, saying he was fine and that it was just a minor accident. The real kicker? They then turned to me and asked me to pay for the repairs. That's right. They asked me to pay $14,500 for repairs to a car I didn't own, didn't drive, and was destroyed because my brother chose to drive drunk. I was stunned. How could they even ask me to contribute to fixing this car when I had no part in the accident? But my parents, once again, played the family loyalty card. My mother told me, "We're all in this together. You should help out." My father tried to guilt-trip me, saying that I was being selfish and that I should be the bigger person. But this time, I wasn't going to give in. When I refused to pay for the repairs, things escalated quickly. My brother, not content with just getting away with reckless driving, decided to frame me for vandalizing the Tesla. He took my baseball bat from my room, further damaged the car, and planted the bat outside, hoping to make it look like I had done it. I couldn't believe what I was hearing when my father held up the bat and accused me of damaging the car. My parents and my brother were all in on it. They were trying to set me up for a crime I didn't commit. The moment I realized what they were doing, I knew I had to take action. I went straight to the insurance investigator and told him everything about the reckless driving, the crash, and how my family was trying to frame me. I provided him with evidence of Tristan's history of dangerous driving, including the TikTok videos, and explained how my parents had tried to cover up the crash. The investigator was thorough. He checked the damage to the Tesla, compared it to the previous damage, and realized that the two incidents were distinct. The airbags had already been deployed in the first crash, and the new damage didn't match the initial impact. It didn't take long for the truth to come out. The insurance company refused to cover the damage, and Tristan was arrested for insurance fraud and driving under the influence. My parents were not charged, but they had to pay hefty fines for their involvement in the cover-up. Meanwhile, I finally had the peace of mind I had been yearning for. I moved out of my parents' house, found a place of my own, and started to rebuild my life. For the first time in years, I felt like I had control over my own future. I received a promotion at work and enrolled in night classes to pursue an MBA. I didn't have to deal with my brother's drama or my parents' manipulation. I could focus on what mattered myself. And as for my family, they tried to contact me repeatedly after the incident, but I had finally learned to put myself first. No more enabling. No more being the scapegoat. I had broken free from the toxic cycle they had created. Looking back, I realized that standing up for myself was the best decision I ever made. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. Sometimes, the hardest thing to do is to let go of the people who have held you back, even if they're family. But in the end, it was the only way I could truly be free. Life is filled with moments where we must choose between what is easy and what is right. One of the most important lessons from this story is the value of standing up for ourselves, even when it means going against the grain of family or societal expectations. For many, especially as we grow older, family loyalty and the desire to maintain peace can often lead us to sacrifice our own needs and well-being. However, We must remember that true family support should be unconditional, and no one, not even a family member, should be allowed to manipulate or take advantage of us. It's essential to set boundaries and protect our peace, no matter how difficult that may seem. We are never too old to change the course of our lives and to demand the respect and fairness we deserve. The story serves as a reminder that our happiness and dignity are worth fighting for, even when it feels like we are alone in our decisions. Ultimately, by taking control of our own destiny and choosing integrity over compromise, we not only improve our own lives, but also show others the power of self-respect. The strength to say no when necessary is not a sign of weakness, but an affirmation of our own value. Thank you for watching this video on Silent Wars. If you enjoyed the story, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to stay updated on all our future content. We appreciate your support, and we look forward to bringing you more incredible stories. See you in the next one.